Billionaire falls in love with poor girl in a small cafe where love costs less than a cup of tea. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the channel. Have you ever wondered what happens when a billionaire falls in love with a girl from a completely different world? Well, today's story is going to take you on a roller coaster ride of emotions, love, and unexpected twists. But fair warning, things aren't always as they seem in fairy tales, so buckle up for a surprise or two. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Stories TH for more exciting content, and leave a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. I'd love to hear what time it is where you are. Let's see how far our little community stretches. Now sit back, relax, and get ready for a heartwarming tale of love that defies all odds. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. The unexpected encounter. Liam Rivers had everything: money, power, influence, but he didn't have the one thing he craved most: peace. Despite being one of the wealthiest men in the country, his life often felt like a whirlwind, spinning out of control, with no time to breathe or feel at ease. The high-rise penthouses, the sleek corporate offices, the expensive cars, they were all just symbols of success, but they didn't bring him the sense of calm he longed for. That's why, on a cold autumn morning, he found himself wandering into a small, cozy cafe, tucked away on a quiet street in the city. It wasn't his usual hangout. In fact, he rarely ventured away from the luxury places he was accustomed to. But today was different. Today, he wanted to be anonymous, to escape the constant chatter of the boardroom, the constant pressure of being the CEO of a billion-dollar empire. He wanted nothing more than to be just a man, not the face of a global conglomerate. The smell of fresh coffee beans and the soft hum of low conversations greeted him as he entered. The cafe was a far cry from the glamorous spaces he was used to. The tables were mismatched, the walls adorned with local art, and the lighting was soft, creating an intimate and welcoming atmosphere. He stood there for a moment, taking it all in. This quiet simplicity felt like a breath of fresh air. He took a seat at an empty table near the window, ordering a simple cup of coffee. As he waited, his mind wandered. He'd always been surrounded by people who wanted something from him, whether it was money, favors, or access. He couldn't remember the last time he had a genuine conversation with someone who didn't want something in return. Here, in this unassuming cafe, he hoped for something different. Just as he took a sip of his coffee, he saw her Isabella Monroe. She walked in, her presence almost a contrast to the entire cafe. While most of the patrons were either busy working or chatting with friends, Isabella had an air of quiet confidence about her. She was dressed simply in a vintage jacket and a pair of worn jeans, but there was something about her that stood out. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back, and her hazel eyes seemed to hold a depth that made him want to know more. Liam wasn't the kind of man to be easily intrigued by appearances. He had seen enough beautiful women to last a lifetime. But there was something different about Isabella. It wasn't her looks, although they were striking. It was her energy, her aura. It was as if she carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, but still managed to move with a sense of grace that made everyone around her feel lighter. As fate would have it, Isabella's path crossed his when she accidentally knocked over her cup of tea, spilling it all over the table. She looked around, embarrassed, before muttering an apology. "I'm so sorry. I swear I'm not usually this clumsy," she said, her cheeks flushing a soft shade of pink. Liam couldn't help but smile at her. It wasn't the usual polished, rehearsed apology he was used to hearing from people in his circles. There was something refreshingly human about her, as though she wasn't trying to impress anyone. "No harm done," he replied, his voice smooth and calm. "Let me get that for you." Isabella hesitated for a moment before accepting his offer. She wasn't used to accepting help from strangers, but something about Liam's warmth put her at ease. She didn't know why, but she felt an instant connection. She couldn't help but notice the kindness in his eyes, which contrasted with the aloofness she had grown accustomed to seeing in people who walked in his circles. They sat together, awkward at first, but quickly warming up to one another. The conversation began slowly, as most do when two strangers meet, but there was a natural flow between them. Liam learned that Isabella wasn't like the women he usually encountered. She wasn't impressed by his wealth, his status, or the things he could offer. In fact, she seemed almost indifferent to it. Instead, she was more interested in his thoughts, his dreams, and his passions. For the first time in a long while, Liam found himself genuinely intrigued by someone. She shared stories of her childhood, growing up in a small town where money was always tight. Her family had never been rich, but they had something more important: love, loyalty, and the kind of bond that came from enduring hardship together. Isabella had moved to the city in search of a better life, but it wasn't easy. She worked long hours at a local bookstore, barely making enough to pay rent and keep food on the table. But there was an undeniable spark in her eyes, a determination to rise above her circumstances, no matter the cost. Liam found himself captivated by her resilience, her strength, and her passion for life. She didn't need money, power, or luxury to feel complete. She had a quiet, fierce independence that he admired, and for a brief moment, he wondered what it would be like to live a life so free from the weight of expectation and obligation. As the conversation continued, Liam found himself laughing more than he had in weeks. Isabella's sense of humor was sharp, and she had a way of making even the most mundane topics seem interesting. She wasn't afraid to challenge him, to push him to think differently about the world. They disagreed on a few things, but it felt like a healthy debate, not a confrontation. For Liam, it was a refreshing change. He had spent so many years surrounded by people who told him what he wanted to hear, people who agreed with him because they wanted something from him. But Isabella was different. She wasn't afraid to speak her mind, and he found that incredibly attractive. At the end of their conversation, they exchanged numbers, and Isabella promised to see him again. As she left the cafe, Liam watched her disappear into the bustling street, a sense of longing settling in his chest. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt so alive, so connected to another person. It wasn't about the money, the luxury, or the fame. It was about something much simpler, the kind of connection that transcended all of those things. Little did he know, this chance encounter in a small cafe would change the course of his life forever. As he sat back in his seat, he realized that love, for the first time, was something that cost less than a cup of tea, but its value was immeasurable. The light of the cafe. The next few days were a blur for Liam. His routine meetings, calls, and endless hours of paperwork felt monotonous, but there was something different this time. In between the hustle and bustle of his high-powered life, he couldn't help but think about Isabella. The memory of their conversation lingered, like the soft aroma of the coffee they had shared, still lingering in his mind. Her laugh, her eyes, the way she spoke about her life without bitterness, despite all the struggles, it was all so captivating. He found himself making excuses to go back to that same cafe, a place he had never really considered before. At first, he told himself it was for the coffee, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. It was about the chance to see her again, to hear her voice, to feel that strange pull he couldn't explain. On the third day, he walked into the cafe just as the clock struck noon. The usual crowd was there, students hunched over laptops, business people sipping their lattes, but his eyes immediately found her. Isabella was sitting in her usual corner, her back straight as she focused on the book in front of her. Her long hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she was so immersed in the pages that she didn't notice Liam standing there for a moment. He hesitated, unsure whether to approach her. She didn't owe him anything. She had no reason to expect him, and yet he found himself drawn to her in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Finally, he walked over to her table, his footsteps quiet on the wooden floor. "Mind if I join you?" Liam asked, his voice softer than he had intended. Isabella looked up, surprised but not uncomfortable. "Liam," she said, her face lighting up with a warm, genuine smile. "Of course, I was hoping you'd show up." Her words took him by surprise. The honesty in her tone, the way she didn't try to hide her excitement at seeing him, it was different from anything he was used to. Most people, especially in his world, would have been more guarded, more cautious, but not Isabella. She was refreshingly open, and it made him feel alive in a way that nothing else could. He sat down across from her, and as soon as he did, the conversation picked up as if they had been talking for years. There was no awkwardness, no forced small talk. They slipped into their usual rhythm, exchanging stories and opinions, laughing over small things, and sharing their lives in a way that felt effortless. This time, the talk wasn't just about their personal lives. They delved deeper. They talked about the future, about the things they both wanted to achieve, the dreams that seemed just out of reach. Isabella spoke of her passion for writing and her hopes of one day publishing a novel, while Liam confessed his struggles with the pressure of his business and the loneliness that often came with success. "What's the point of all this wealth and success if I'm just surrounded by people who don't care about me?" Liam said, his voice filled with frustration. "It's like I'm living in a glass bubble. Everything looks perfect from the outside, but I'm suffocating inside." Isabella listened quietly, her eyes softening as she took in his words. She understood loneliness, she had lived it for years. But it was different for him. He had everything, but it still wasn't enough. "You know," Isabella said thoughtfully, "sometimes we get so caught up in chasing after things that we forget about what really matters. You're so focused on the big picture that you've missed the small moments, the moments that actually make life worth living." Her words struck him. She was right, of course. He had spent so many years focused on his empire that he had neglected the things that truly brought him joy. Genuine human connection, laughter, love. She was offering him something that no amount of money could buy: a sense of peace, a sense of belonging. The next few weeks passed in a blur of quiet moments spent in the café, where they continued to meet, share stories, and slowly begin to understand one another. Isabella, with her grounded nature and her ability to find beauty in the small things, helped Liam see the world in a different light. She encouraged him to step away from the constant pressure of his high-powered world and simply enjoy the moment, even if it was just sipping tea in a cozy cafe. Liam, in turn, began to open up more about his life, shedding some of the armor he had built over the years. He revealed more about his childhood, the sacrifices his family had made to get him to where he was, and the expectations that weighed heavily on him. Isabella listened with rapt attention, never judging, never rushing to offer advice. She simply listened, and for Liam, that was more than enough. Yet, despite the growing connection between them, something lingered in the back of his mind. He knew that their worlds were different. She lived a simple life, one that was focused on survival, on dreams that were just beginning to take root. He, on the other hand, was already entrenched in a world of luxury, status, and expectation. Could love really blossom between them? Was it possible for someone like him, with all his wealth and power, to truly be with someone like Isabella, who had so little in comparison? Isabella, too, had her doubts. She admired Liam, but she was acutely aware of their differences. She wasn't sure if she could ever truly belong in his world, and she feared that, in the end, he might see her as nothing more than a temporary distraction, someone who didn't belong in his high society world. She had seen it before, the way wealthy men used their status to get what they wanted, then moved on to the next person when they grew bored. But in the midst of all their uncertainties, one thing was clear. They couldn't deny the pull they felt toward each other. Every time they met, the connection deepened, and despite their fears, they couldn't stop the growing affection that was blossoming between them. Their love, though new and fragile, was beginning to take root in a place that neither of them had expected: a small cafe, where, for the first time in a long time, they felt truly seen. The unspoken fears. It had been a month since Liam and Isabella first met at that small cafe, and in those weeks, something had changed between them. The moments they shared, though simple, had woven a tapestry of connection neither of them had expected. Every meeting was a new chapter, one that felt more and more like a story written just for them. Yet, beneath the surface of their blossoming relationship, there were still unspoken fears that neither of them could ignore. For Liam, the fear was clear. He couldn't stop thinking about how their worlds were colliding. He had always known that his wealth and status created barriers with people. He had grown up with the understanding that money meant power, and power often meant distance. But with Isabella, he felt something different, a kind of closeness he hadn't experienced in years. The way she saw him for who he truly was, not just a business mogul, was refreshing. But he couldn't shake the feeling that it would never be enough. Was she really interested in him? Or was it the idea of him, the allure of the life he could provide? As they sat across from each other one rainy afternoon, the weight of their differences seemed to loom over them more than ever. The cafe was quieter than usual, the sound of the rain against the windows providing a soothing backdrop to their conversation. Isabella sipped her tea, the steam rising from the cup, and smiled at Liam. But even as she smiled, Liam could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Is everything okay?" Liam asked, his voice soft but insistent. He had noticed the change in her demeanor over the past few days, how she seemed distant even when they were together. Isabella paused, setting her cup down slowly. Her fingers traced the rim of the cup, and for a moment she didn't look at him. It wasn't that she didn't want to talk, it was that she didn't know how to put her feelings into words. She had spent so much of her life trying to protect herself from heartbreak that she had built walls without even realizing it. But with Liam, the walls felt like they were starting to crumble, and it terrified her. "Liam, I don't know what this is," she said finally, her voice tinged with a quiet vulnerability. "I don't know what I'm doing here with you. You live in a world that I don't belong in. I don't want to be a passing moment for you, something you forget once you find someone who fits better into your world. I'm just a small-town girl. I don't even know if I can keep up with you." Liam listened, his heart aching at the raw honesty in her voice. He had always known she was different, that she didn't care about his wealth or status. But what she was saying hit him harder than he expected. She wasn't just afraid of the difference between their lives, she was afraid of losing herself in his world. She feared that no matter how much they cared for each other, she would never be enough. "Isabella, you're more than enough," Liam said, his tone firm yet gentle. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his, and for the first time, it felt like something real. "I'm not asking you to fit into my world. I'm asking you to be in my life, just as you are. The way you see the world, the way you make me feel, none of that has anything to do with money or power. It's about you. It's always been about you." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face, trying to find the truth in his words. But the doubt still lingered, gnawing at her. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this could be more than just a fleeting romance, that it could be something that lasted. But she had seen too many people like Liam, men who had everything they could ever want, and yet were always searching for something more. "You're a billionaire, Liam," she said quietly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "And I'm just a bookstore clerk. What happens when you get bored, when you realize you could have someone who fits into your world better than I do?" Liam's grip tightened on her hand. "That's not what this is about, Isabella. I don't need someone who fits into my world. I need someone who sees me for who I am, not what I have, and that's you. I don't want a life of luxury and fame. I want a life with you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning, but Isabella wasn't sure she could completely believe him. Her own fears, the ones she had buried deep within her for so long, began to surface. She had been hurt before, by people who had promised her the world and then walked away. She didn't know if she was strong enough to let herself fall again. Just then, a soft laugh escaped her lips, and she looked down at their intertwined hands. "I'm sorry," she said, shaking her head. "I'm just scared, I guess. I don't know how to let someone in like this, not after everything." Liam's heart softened. He could see the vulnerability in her, and he wanted to ease her fears. "You don't have to let me in all at once," he said. "I'm not asking for everything right now. I just want to be a part of your life, in whatever way feels right to you." They sat there for a long time, not speaking, just letting the quiet settle around them. The rain outside had slowed, and the cafe had filled with the soft hum of conversation. Liam could feel the distance between them slowly narrowing, but he knew it would take time. He didn't expect her to give him all her trust in one moment. All he wanted was to prove that this wasn't just a passing fancy, It was real, and he was willing to show her that, no matter how long it took. As they left the cafe that afternoon, the world outside seemed a little brighter, a little more hopeful. Isabella didn't have all the answers, and neither did Liam. But for the first time in a long while, they were willing to face their fears together. The future was uncertain, but the connection between them was undeniable. And sometimes, that's all you need to start believing in the possibility of something more. The secret unveiled. As the days passed, Liam and Isabella grew closer. Despite the lingering uncertainties, their connection deepened in ways neither of them had expected. The more they shared with one another, the more they realized how much they had to offer beyond their outward differences. Isabella's simplicity and grounded nature balanced Liam's high-powered, chaotic lifestyle, and in return, Liam's unwavering dedication to his work and vision gave Isabella the confidence to chase her own dreams. But despite the growing bond, there was still something heavy that hung in the air, a secret Liam had yet to reveal. He had tried to keep it buried, thinking that it would only complicate things, but as their relationship blossomed, the truth began to claw at him from the inside. Liam wasn't just a billionaire, he was also a man of significant influence in the business world. He had been raised with the expectations of a dynasty, and the pressure to live up to that legacy had shaped every decision he made. While he could escape into the quiet world of the cafe with Isabella, he was still tied to a much larger world, a world full of people who expected him to follow a very specific path. For the first time in his life, though, he questioned that path. The more time he spent with Isabella, the more he realized that his success didn't define him. She didn't care about his money, his power, or the expectations placed on him. She cared about the man beneath all of that, the man who, just like her, had fears, doubts, and desires. But there was a twist to Liam's life that could potentially tear them apart. Liam's family had arranged a marriage for him. It was a business arrangement, an alliance between two powerful families, and it had been in the works since he was a child. His fiancée, Evelyn Blackwood, was a woman from his own social class, someone he was expected to marry, someone who fit the mold of what was right for his image and status. Liam had always been compliant with his family's wishes, always doing what was expected of him to maintain his position. But as the days went by, he found himself more and more at odds with the life they had planned for him. Isabella, however, was not part of the plan. As the truth began to weigh on him, Liam knew he had to make a choice. He couldn't continue this double life, living in two separate worlds, hiding his relationship with Isabella from his family. He had always feared the consequences of defying his family, of breaking away from the path that had been laid out for him. But now, the fear of losing Isabella, the one person who truly saw him, seemed far greater. One evening, after an especially tense meeting with his parents, Liam found himself sitting in the cafe with Isabella, struggling with the weight of his secret. Isabella could sense something was off as soon as she saw him. His usually calm demeanor was replaced with an air of frustration and unease. "Liam, what's wrong?" Isabella asked gently, her voice soft but filled with concern. She could see the tension in his posture, the way he ran his fingers through his hair, as if trying to find the right words. He took a deep breath, his gaze meeting hers, and for the first time, he allowed himself to show her the vulnerability he had hidden for so long. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Something important. And I don't want it to change the way you see me." Isabella's heart began to race. She didn't know what he was about to say, but she knew that whatever it was, it mattered. She could feel the gravity of the situation in the air between them. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam swallowed hard. "I'm engaged," he said, his words hanging heavily in the air. "To someone else. It's not something I want, but it's something my family expects of me. I've been doing what they wanted for years, putting their desires before my own, and I've been so afraid of what will happen if I step away from that." Isabella's world seemed to freeze for a moment. She couldn't comprehend what she was hearing. The man she had come to care for, the man she thought was so different from the others in his world, was bound by the same pressures she had feared all along. "You're engaged?" she repeated, her voice shaky. "To her? Evelyn Blackwood?" Liam nodded, unable to meet her gaze. "Yes, but I don't love her. I never did. I've been going through the motions, trying to please my family, but I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of lying to you." The silence between them was deafening. Isabella didn't know what to say. The news hit her like a blow to the chest. For all their connection, for all the beautiful moments they shared, it seemed like their worlds would never truly align. She had known it was too good to be true. She had known that someone like Liam couldn't just break free from the life that was expected of him. "I don't know what to do with this," Isabella said quietly, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can be a part of this secret world. I thought we were building something real, but now I don't know if I can trust any of it." Liam's heart broke at the sight of the pain in her eyes. He had never intended to hurt her, but he had. And now he had to face the consequences of keeping this secret for so long. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I never wanted to drag you into this, but I've been lying to myself. I can't keep living this way, but I don't want to lose you, Isabella. I don't want to lose what we have." Isabella's mind raced. She didn't know what to think or feel. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak. But another part of her, one she didn't want to admit, wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out for both of them. "Liam, I need time," she said, her voice barely audible. "I need time to figure out if I can be a part of this. If I can live in a world where secrets are the price of love." With that, she stood up, her legs unsteady as she walked toward the door. Liam watched her leave, the weight of his secret settling over him like a suffocating blanket. He knew this was only the beginning of the battle ahead, but he was determined to fight for her, for them. But whether she would be willing to fight for him too was another question altogether. The decision. The next few days felt like a blur to Liam. He tried to focus on work, to distract himself from the overwhelming weight of the secret he had revealed, but it was impossible. Every corner of his mind was occupied by Isabella's absence. The café, once a place of comfort, now felt like a void without her presence. The quiet moments they shared, the laughter, the deep conversations, the moments of understanding seemed so distant now, like a dream slipping away. Liam had always been in control. As the CEO of a billion-dollar company, he made decisions every day that affected countless lives. He was used to having the power to shape his world. But when it came to Isabella, he felt completely powerless. She had been his escape from the suffocating world of expectations, and now he had risked losing her because of the very world he had tried so hard to escape. Meanwhile, Isabella had spent the past few days reflecting on what Liam had said. The pain in her chest was still raw, and she struggled with the reality of the situation. She had always known that their lives were different, but this felt like a whole new level of disparity. Liam's engagement to Evelyn Blackwood, his family's expectation for him, was a world she could never enter. She had always prided herself on being independent, on making her own decisions, but now she felt trapped by the very thing she had feared, the world of wealth and power that had the potential to consume everything. She knew she couldn't stay in the dark forever, couldn't keep pretending that this wasn't a part of her reality. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she wasn't just angry at Liam. She was angry at herself for allowing herself to believe in something that seemed so impossible. But at the same time, she couldn't deny the feelings that had developed between them. The connection they shared had been undeniable, and it made her question everything she had believed about love, about what was possible for people like her. Isabella needed to talk to him, to clear the air, to understand if they had any chance at all. But deep down, she knew that the answer wouldn't come easily. On the 5th day after their confrontation, Isabella found herself walking back to the same café, the place that had once been a sanctuary for both of them. The rain had stopped, and the afternoon sun filtered through the clouds, casting a soft glow over the streets. The city seemed quieter than usual, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for the resolution to come. She stepped inside, the familiar bell above the door chiming softly. She looked around, her eyes searching for him. And there he was, sitting at their usual table by the window, his hands clasped together, his expression distant, as though he were lost in thought. He didn't see her at first, but when he finally looked up and their gazes met, something shifted in the air. He stood up immediately, a look of surprise and hope crossing his features. "Isabella," Liam said softly, his voice almost a whisper, as though he wasn't sure if he was dreaming or not. "I didn't expect to see you." She hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with everything she wanted to say, everything she needed to say. Finally, she stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside, "about what you said, about everything." Liam took a step closer, his expression filled with uncertainty. "And?" Isabella looked him in the eye, her gaze intense, her words deliberate. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we can make it work, but I can't just walk away without understanding one thing. Do you love me, Liam?" The question hung between them like a heavy fog, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The cafe around them was quiet, the world seemingly suspended as they stood there, on the precipice of something neither of them could fully grasp. Liam's heart raced, and for the first time in days, he felt something other than fear. He had spent so long fighting against the idea of giving up his power and control, but in that moment, he realized that none of that mattered. The only thing that truly mattered was the woman standing before him. He took a deep breath, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I do," he said simply. "I love you, Isabella. I've loved you from the moment we met, and I don't want to live in a world where you're not in it." Isabella's heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear. She had been so afraid of the future, so afraid of what it might bring, but in Liam's eyes, she saw something different. She saw honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to fight for what they had. But the question still lingered. Could they really make it work? Could they build something lasting in a world so determined to tear them apart? "I don't know how we can make this work," Isabella said, her voice tinged with doubt. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to navigate a world that isn't mine. I'm scared, Liam." Liam stepped closer, gently cupping her face with his hands. "I'm scared too, but I want to try. I'll do whatever it takes to make this work, to make you feel like you're not alone in this." Isabella closed her eyes, letting the warmth of his touch sink into her skin. The world outside, with all its complexities and pressures, seemed so far away in that moment. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future one where she and Liam could stand together, not as two people from different worlds, but as two people who loved each other despite the odds. Slowly, she opened her eyes, meeting his gaze once again. "Okay," she whispered, a small, hopeful smile forming on her lips. "Let's try." Liam's heart swelled with relief and gratitude. He had been willing to lose everything to be with her, but now, with her by his side, he felt like anything was possible. There was no guarantee that it would be easy, but for the first time in his life, he was ready to face whatever came next. They stood there, hands intertwined, in a world that was still uncertain, but for the first time, they weren't afraid of the unknown. Together, they would find a way. Facing the future. In the weeks that followed, Liam and Isabella stepped cautiously into a new chapter of their relationship. They had decided to try, to take a leap of faith despite the challenges that still loomed in the distance. But as much as they wanted to believe that love could overcome all obstacles, they quickly realized that the path ahead wouldn't be as easy as they had hoped. Liam's world, the one he had tried to step away from, continued to pull him back in. The pressure from his family grew heavier with each passing day. His engagement to Evelyn Blackwood was no longer just an arrangement, it had become a public spectacle. The media caught wind of it, and soon the story was splashed across tabloids, adding to the weight of the expectation that he marry into the right family. His mother, always the pillar of societal propriety, began calling more frequently, urging him to make decisions about the wedding, about the future. She pushed him to make it official, to announce it to the world. Liam hated every moment of it. But as much as he resented the world he was born into, he still wasn't ready to cut all ties. His business, his legacy, was entangled with his family's wealth, and to sever that connection would mean risking everything he had worked for. It wasn't just about money, it was about power, influence, and years of expectations. Every time his mother called, he felt a gnawing sense of guilt. But whenever he saw Isabella, when they shared moments of calm and connection, he was reminded of why he had to fight for something different. Isabella, for her part, was still grappling with the same uncertainties. She had agreed to give this relationship a chance, but the world Liam came from felt like an overwhelming tide she couldn't navigate. The glitz and glam, the endless events, and the constant scrutiny were things she had never imagined for herself. She had spent so many years trying to build a life on her own terms, and now it seemed like she was being pulled into a life she hadn't chosen. One evening, after a particularly difficult conversation with Liam about his family's demands, Isabella found herself sitting alone in the café. The place had become their refuge, their quiet space away from the chaos of the outside world. But tonight, it felt different. The weight of the decisions ahead hung over her like a dark cloud, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads. Liam walked in not long after, looking just as weary as she felt. He hesitated when he saw her, unsure whether she was waiting for him or lost in her own thoughts. But when their eyes met, he knew he had to join her. He sat down across from her, his expression tense. "Isabella, we need to talk." She nodded, her heart heavy. "I know. I've been thinking about this too." They sat in silence for a moment, neither of them sure how to begin. But finally, Isabella broke the quiet. "Liam, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm not sure I can live in this world you're in. I can't be part of a life where everything is constantly under a microscope, where I feel like I'm always being judged. I don't belong there." Liam reached out, his hand gently covering hers. "I don't want you to feel like you don't belong. You do, Isabella. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. But I can't change who I am, or what my family expects of me." Isabella looked down at their hands, the contrast between their worlds feeling more glaring than ever. "But I'm not like them, Liam. I don't want a life of constant pressure, constant judgment. I want something real, something simple. I want to wake up in the morning knowing that the life I'm living is mine, not someone else's idea of who I should be." Liam's heart ached at the pain in her voice. He had always known this would be hard. He had always known that his world was nothing like hers. But hearing her say it so plainly made him realize just how big the gap between them really was. "Isabella, I'm not asking you to change who you are. I don't know how to make it all fit. How to balance everything and still be with you." Isabella stood up suddenly, her emotions bubbling to the surface. "That's the problem, Liam. You shouldn't have to balance it. Love shouldn't feel like a negotiation. It shouldn't feel like I have to fit into your world or mold myself to be what you need me to be. You can't ask me to change, and you can't ask me to stay in a life that's not mine." Liam stood up too, desperate to bridge the gap between them. He couldn't lose her, not after everything they had shared. "Isabella, I love you. I've never been more sure of anything. I just need time to figure out how I can make this work. I'm not giving up on us." She met his gaze, her eyes filled with tears, a mixture of hope and fear. "And what if I don't have that time? What if I can't wait around for you to figure it out? I've spent too much of my life waiting for things to be perfect, waiting for someone else to decide my future. I can't wait for you to make up your mind. I can't live in limbo forever." The words hit Liam harder than he had anticipated. He could feel his chest tighten as she spoke. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about her own life, her own decisions. He couldn't ask her to wait forever while he sorted out his life. "I can't ask you to wait, I know that," Liam said, his voice breaking slightly. "But I don't know how to let you go either." Isabella looked away for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. Maybe it's not about letting me go, Liam. Maybe it's about deciding whether we can both have what we need. Maybe love isn't enough to bridge the gap between us. Liam's heart sank as she spoke. The reality of their situation was clear. There were no easy answers, no perfect solutions. They were two people from completely different worlds, trying to find a way to make it work. But sometimes, love wasn't enough to overcome the things that divided them. Maybe you're right, he whispered, a bitter realization settling over him. But I'm not ready to give up on us. Not yet. Isabella nodded, wiping away a tear. I'm not ready to give up either. But we both need to figure out what comes next. And if we're going to make this work, it has to be on our own terms, not theirs. They sat there in silence, the weight of the future pressing down on them both. Neither of them knew what would come next, but one thing was certain. The path ahead would require more than just love. It would require choices, sacrifices, and the courage to face the future, no matter how uncertain it might be. The breaking point. Days turned into weeks, and the pressure continued to build between Liam and Isabella. The time they spent together, while still meaningful and intense, was increasingly clouded by the mounting uncertainties that threatened to tear them apart. Neither of them could deny the undeniable truth, despite their love for each other. Their worlds were like parallel lines that would never quite meet. Liam tried his best to keep his family at bay. He avoided his mother's calls, pushed off meetings with Evelyn, and spent more time at the cafe than he had ever planned. But each time he saw Isabella, the conversation inevitably turned to the same subject: the future. They both knew that the way things were going couldn't last forever. Their love had always been built on hope and the promise of something better. But as time passed, they realized that hope alone wasn't enough to bridge the gap between their worlds. Isabella felt the weight of the decision that loomed over them. She loved Liam with everything she had. There was no denying that. But each day that passed, the fear grew stronger. The fear that she would lose herself in his world. The fear that she would never truly be a part of his life. She didn't want to live in a world of secrets, of expectations, and constant scrutiny. She didn't want to be the woman behind the billionaire, the one who existed only in the shadows. She needed something real, something that was hers, something that didn't come with strings attached. And she had come to realize that she couldn't live in constant fear of what might happen if they didn't work out. She had her own dreams, her own life to build. And the longer she stayed in limbo with Liam, the more she felt like she was sacrificing herself. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner with his parents, Liam found himself walking to the cafe once again. He had just come from a meeting with Evelyn, who had subtly reminded him that time was running out for their engagement. His family expected an announcement soon, and they were pushing him to make decisions that felt more like chains around his wrists. As he approached the cafe, he saw Isabella sitting alone by the window, her profile lit by the soft glow of the streetlights outside. She looked peaceful, almost serene, but he could tell that something had changed. There was a distance in her posture, a tension in the way she held herself. Liam's heart sank as he walked inside, unsure of what he would find. He sat down across from her, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The familiar warmth of the cafe did little to ease the growing sense of discomfort that filled the space between them. It wasn't just the silence, it was the weight of everything they had been avoiding. Isabella looked at him, her eyes soft but weary. "Liam," she began, her voice quieter than usual. "I've been thinking a lot, and I don't think I can do this anymore." Liam's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I can't keep living in this world where everything feels like it's falling apart," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I can't keep pretending that things are going to magically get better. The truth is, I'm scared. I'm scared that I'll lose myself in your world, that I'll become just another part of your life, without ever being truly seen." Liam felt a knot form in his stomach. He had known that she was struggling, but hearing it out loud made it all the more real. "Isabella, please," I love you. I know this is hard, but I want to make it work. I don't want to lose you." Isabella shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "It's not about losing me, Liam. It's about losing myself. I've spent my entire life fighting for independence, for control over my own destiny. And right now, I feel like I'm drowning in a world I don't belong in. I can't keep trying to fit into a life that's not mine." Liam reached out, taking her hand gently in his. "But I don't want you to change, Isabella. You don't have to fit into my world. I love you for who you are, not for what you can give me. Please, don't walk away." Isabella looked down at their intertwined hands, her mind torn. She could feel the sincerity in his words, but the reality of their situation still weighed heavily on her. She had tried so hard to make it work. But every day she spent in this world felt like a reminder that it wasn't hers. She wanted to be seen as more than just the woman who stood beside a billionaire. She wanted to be seen for who she was, not just the woman he loved. "I need time, Liam," she whispered. "I need time to figure out who I am, without you, without all of this." Liam's heart broke at the sound of her words. He knew he couldn't force her to stay, but the thought of losing her was unbearable. "Isabella, please. I can't imagine my life without you. I'm not asking you to give up your dreams. I'm just asking for a chance to figure this out together. Don't leave me, please." But Isabella's mind was made up. "I can't live like this anymore," she said, standing up from the table. "I need to find my own way without this constant pressure, without the fear of losing myself in someone else's world. I love you, Liam, but I need to find myself again." Liam watched helplessly as she turned and walked out of the cafe, the door closing softly behind her. The pain in his chest was unbearable. He had always believed that love could conquer anything, but now he saw the truth. Love wasn't enough to overcome the difference between their worlds. He could offer her all the riches, all the luxury in the world, but it would never be enough if she didn't have her own life, her own sense of self. As he sat there alone, staring at the empty chair across from him, Liam realized something he hadn't fully understood before. Sometimes, love wasn't about holding on. It was about letting go of the things that stood in the way of their happiness, and letting each other be free to live the lives they were meant to lead. For the first time in his life, Liam understood that love meant freedom, but it also meant sacrifice. The silent decision. The days after Isabella walked out of the cafe were the hardest Liam had ever faced. The silence in his penthouse apartment was deafening. He couldn't escape the weight of her absence, her laugh, the way her eyes would light up when she talked about her dreams, even the way she would steal his coffee from his cup. Everything about her seemed to echo through the halls of his mind. He spent the first few nights staring at the walls, trying to find a way to undo the decisions that had led to this moment. The quiet ringing of his phone, filled with messages from his mother and Evelyn, only served as reminders that his world hadn't stopped spinning. His family continued to demand his attention, the business still required his oversight, and the future they had planned for him loomed large. But all of that felt so distant now, as if it didn't matter anymore. He only wanted one thing: to fix what was broken between him and Isabella. But he had no idea where to start. Meanwhile, Isabella was struggling too. It wasn't that she didn't love Liam, she did, with every fiber of her being, but she couldn't ignore the painful truth that had been growing in the back of her mind. Their love, as deep and real as it was never going to be enough if they couldn't reconcile their two worlds. She had spent so much of her life fighting to create her own identity, her own path, but now it felt like she was losing herself in the process. She couldn't keep navigating Liam's world of privilege and expectation. It was a world that felt like it was designed for someone else, someone who had the power to navigate it with ease. Isabella found herself walking through the streets of the city, trying to clear her mind. She had returned to the bookstore, hoping the comfort of familiar surroundings would help her regain some sense of control. But even there, the walls felt confining. as though the very air she breathed was full of reminders of Liam, his favorite novels on the shelf, the cafes they used to visit, the places where they had shared pieces of their lives. She could still feel him with her, even in his absence. The pain of walking away from him was sharp, but she knew it was the right thing to do. She had to reclaim herself, to rebuild the life she had once dreamt of. But as the days went by, the guilt began to settle in her chest. Was it really the right decision? Could they have made it work, despite everything? And even more importantly, did Liam truly understand the kind of life she needed? Isabella thought of him constantly, her heart torn in two. She couldn't shake the memory of the way he had looked at her that night, his eyes pleading for a chance, for the space to work things out. But she also knew that nothing had changed. Their worlds were still too different, too far apart. She had given him a piece of herself, but she couldn't afford to lose everything in the process. And yet, despite all the fear and uncertainty, there was still a small part of her that wondered what would happen if she gave it one more try. The question of whether they could truly build a life together, whether their love could grow beyond the constraints of their differences, lingered in the corners of her mind. But could she ask that of herself? Could she let go of her independence for love? As the days passed, Liam finally decided that he couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't keep living in the shadow of what-ifs. He needed to see Isabella again, to talk to her one last time. The thought of losing her completely was more unbearable than the pressure he felt from his family. He knew there were no easy answers, but he had to try. He made his way back to the cafe, the place where it all began, and sat at the same window table where he had first met her. He felt her absence like a physical ache, and he couldn't shake the feeling that their story wasn't over. Not yet. Isabella had told him that she needed time. She had said she needed to find herself, to reclaim her independence. And as he sat there, waiting, he understood. He understood that love wasn't about holding someone back, about forcing them to fit into your world. Love, true love, was about letting someone go so they could grow, even if it meant living apart. He could give her time, give her the space she needed, but that didn't mean giving up on them. Isabella walked in, just as the cafe was beginning to fill with the afternoon crowd. She hesitated at the door for a moment, her eyes scanning the room. When she saw him, her heart fluttered, just as it always did when their eyes met. She had missed him. "Liam," she said softly, her voice a mix of surprise and trepidation. "You're here." Liam stood up as she approached, his heart pounding in his chest. "Isabella, I don't want to do this without you," he said, his voice firm but filled with vulnerability. "I know I can't change the past, but I'm not asking for you to come back to me just because of love. I'm asking for a chance to build something that's ours, without the pressure, without the expectations. I want to find a way to make it work. I want you in my life, the way you deserve to be." Isabella looked at him, her eyes filled with so many conflicting emotions. She could see the sincerity in his face, the raw honesty in his words, but she also knew how difficult it would be to step back into his world, a world that was never truly hers. "I'm not sure I can go back, Liam," she whispered. "I don't know how to make this work either, but I can't deny how I feel about you. I can't forget the moments we shared." Liam took a deep breath, his hand reaching out to gently touch hers. "Then let's start there. We don't have to have all the answers today, Isabella, but I'm willing to take the next step no matter how hard it might be, because I can't imagine my life without you in it." Isabella hesitated, but then slowly she nodded. The uncertainty was still there, the fear that this could fall apart, but there was something else, too, hope, and for the first time in a long time, that hope felt like something worth fighting for. "I'm willing to try, Liam," she said softly. "Let's see where this goes. Together." As they sat down together at the cafe, a sense of peace settled between them. They didn't have all the answers, but they had each other. And for the first time in a long time, they both felt like maybe, just maybe, They could find a way to make it work. Together. A new beginning. The decision to try again wasn't easy for either of them, but as they sat across from each other in the cafe, a small sense of relief washed over them both. The uncertainty that had weighed so heavily on their hearts seemed to lessen, even if only slightly. There were still countless obstacles ahead, and neither of them had any illusions that it would be simple. But for the first time in weeks, they were facing those challenges together. Liam felt an unfamiliar sense of peace as he looked at Isabella. Her presence, once a comforting distraction, now felt like his lifeline. She had been the anchor in his storm of obligations, expectations, and the cold, distant world of wealth he had never fully embraced. But now, more than ever, he was aware of how fragile everything was, how easily it could slip away. "I know this is going to take time," Liam said quietly, his voice sincere. "We can't fix everything overnight, but we can start fresh, and I promise you I'll give you the space you need to figure things out. You don't have to fit into my world, your world matters too." Isabella listened, her heart beating a little faster at the depth of his words. She had heard him speak before, but there was something different now. The sincerity in his voice wasn't just about the promises he made, it was about the recognition that they both had to compromise, to adjust, and to grow together. "I'm not asking for perfection, Liam," she said, her voice steady. "I don't expect everything to magically fall into place, but I need to keep my independence. I need to be able to live my life without constantly being under a microscope. I don't want to lose myself, not again." "I understand," Liam replied, nodding thoughtfully. "I'm not asking you to give that up. I'm asking you to let me be part of your life, even if it's messy and imperfect. I want to make this work for both of us, not just me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply sat together, each one lost in their thoughts. Outside, the city hummed with life, oblivious to the quiet decision unfolding within the small cafe. The streets were lined with people going about their lives, their worries, their routines, and for the first time, Liam realized that the world didn't have to revolve around him. He didn't have to be the center of everything. Isabella took a deep breath and looked at him. "I'm willing to try, Liam," she said, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. "But we both have to change. I can't be the woman behind the scenes, and you can't be the man who expects me to just blend into your life. We have to find something that works for both of us." Liam smiled softly. "I promise you, I'm ready to change. I'm ready to do whatever it takes." It was a promise, but it was also a realization for both of them. The love they shared wasn't enough to solve everything on its own. There would be days filled with doubt, days when the weight of their differences would seem unbearable. But they were willing to face it together. It wasn't about erasing their pasts or pretending that everything was perfect. It was about learning to live with the imperfections, to build something new from the pieces they had. The next few weeks weren't without their struggles. Liam continued to navigate his family's expectations, the pressure to marry Evelyn, and the looming questions about his future. But for the first time, he didn't feel completely trapped by it all. He found small ways to carve out space for Isabella in his world, even as the demands of his business and family continued to pull at him. For Isabella, the challenge was different. She found herself slowly embracing the parts of Liam's world that she had once feared. She attended social events with him, though she still felt like an outsider at times. She learned to navigate the world of high society, not by pretending to fit in, but by finding her own voice within it. She no longer tried to shrink herself to fit into Liam's life. She learned to stand tall, to be herself, even in a world that felt foreign. And in the quiet moments they shared, in the calm after a long day, they both discovered something they had been searching for all along: balance. It wasn't about changing who they were, but about finding a way to let their worlds intersect without losing what made them unique. One evening, after a particularly difficult day for both of them, Liam took Isabella to a new restaurant in the city, one that wasn't part of the glittering high society scene they were both familiar with. It was a small, intimate place tucked away in a corner of the city, known for its understated elegance and delicious food. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was simply about being together in a space where they could just be. As they sat at a small candlelit table, Isabella couldn't help but smile. This was what she had wanted, a life where they could still find joy in the simplest moments, even if everything around them felt chaotic. "This is nice," she said, her voice filled with contentment. "I can't remember the last time I had a meal without feeling like I'm being watched." Liam chuckled, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "I'm glad you like it. I think we could all use more moments like this without the pressure, without the expectations." She raised her glass, her smile genuine. "To finding balance," she said. "To us," Liam replied, his voice full of emotion. "To us, no matter what." They clinked their glasses, and for that moment, everything felt right. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, they both knew that they could face it together. There would be challenges ahead, and they both knew that their love was not the solution to all of life's problems. But they had each other, and for now, that was enough. The journey ahead would be anything but easy, but Liam and Isabella had found the one thing they needed most, the courage to face the unknown with love, trust, and the willingness to build something truly their own. The path forward. As the weeks turned into months, Liam and Isabella found themselves settling into a new rhythm. The balance they had struggled to find slowly began to take shape. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was theirs. Together, they navigated the intricacies of their differences, learning to build a life that was authentic to both of them, not just an attempt to merge two worlds that seemed worlds apart. Liam continued to deal with the pressures of his family and the mounting expectations of his role in the business world. There were still weekly calls from his mother, reminding him of his responsibilities, of the life he was supposed to lead. Evelyn was still a fixture in his life, but he had set clear boundaries. He no longer allowed the expectation of a marriage of convenience to dictate his every move. Instead, he began to prioritize his own happiness, and Isabella was now at the center of that. He spent less time in the corporate boardrooms, focusing more on his passions and the causes he cared about. His life, though still entwined with the family business, began to shift in small ways. The high society events that once felt like a chore became less frequent, and he found himself seeking quiet moments with Isabella, whether it was enjoying a walk in the park or simply having dinner at their favorite café. For Isabella, the transition was just as challenging, but in a different way. At first, she had struggled to adapt to the world of privilege that Liam came from. She had always prided herself on her independence, on building a life without relying on anyone else. But as time passed, she began to see Liam not as the wealthy businessman he was, but as the person he truly was, the one who cared deeply for her, who respected her independence, and who didn't want to change who she was. She had come to terms with her role in Liam's life, learning to carve out space for herself while being a part of his world. She wasn't trying to fit into it, she was simply finding her place within it. And Liam, for his part, made it clear that he didn't want her to change. He wanted her to be the person she had always been, the woman who had caught his attention with her honesty, her wit, and her quiet strength. Still, there were moments of doubt, moments when Isabella would catch herself wondering if they were truly doing the right thing. The pressure of living in two worlds, her humble past and Liam's extravagant present, sometimes felt overwhelming. She still had dreams of opening her own bookstore, of writing the novel she had always wanted to, and she didn't want to sacrifice that for a life she didn't fully understand. But every time doubt crept in, she would think of Liam, of how he had stood by her side through it all, never asking her to be anything but herself. And with that thought, the doubts would recede, replaced by a quiet certainty. They had fought for this, for their chance to be together, and she wasn't ready to give up on it now. One evening, after a particularly grueling day for both of them, they found themselves walking through the city's quiet streets. The air was crisp, the kind of autumn evening that felt like a fresh start. They walked side by side, their hands brushing occasionally, as they had so many times before. There was no rush, no expectation, just the peace that came from being together in the simplicity of the moment. "I've been thinking," Isabella said, breaking the comfortable silence. about the future, about what comes next. Liam glanced at her, his brow furrowing slightly. What about it? She hesitated, trying to find the right words. I think I'm finally ready to take the next step with my life. I've been so focused on figuring out how to fit into yours that I forgot about what I want for myself. I think it's time to start working on my bookstore, actually take that first step. Liam smiled, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. Isabella, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. Whatever you need, you know I'm here for you, right? Whether it's help with finding a place or just someone to listen, I'm in. She smiled back, the weight of her own uncertainty lifting. Thank you. It's scary, but it feels right. And I'm not doing it because of you or because of anything we've been through. I'm doing it because it's time for me to be me again. Liam squeezed her hand gently, his heart full of admiration for her strength. I get that. And I'll support you in whatever you need. I think it's time we both start living the lives we've always dreamed of. We can build something together, but we don't have to sacrifice what makes us who we are. They continued walking, each step feeling lighter than the last. For the first time in a long time, the future seemed full of possibilities. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be challenges ahead, unavoidable, undeniable, but they both knew that together, they could handle whatever came their way. And that was enough. Later that evening, as they sat in their apartment, their dinner untouched in front of them, Liam looked at Isabella. She was smiling softly, her eyes filled with a warmth that made his heart swell. I never thought I'd be here, he said quietly, almost to himself. Isabella turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. Where's here? With you, he said simply. I never thought I'd find someone like you, someone who makes everything feel like it's worth fighting for. She reached over, touching his hand gently. We both had to fight for it, for each other, but I think we're stronger for it. He nodded, his eyes locking with hers. I know we are. And as they sat there together, a quiet promise passed between them, a promise that they would continue to fight, continue to grow, and most importantly, continue to love each other, no matter what the future held. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, they were no longer afraid of it. They were ready for whatever came next. The crossroads. As the weeks turned into months, the new life Liam and Isabella were building began to take shape in ways they hadn't expected. They had come a long way from the moments of uncertainty and doubt, and while there were still bumps in the road, they were no longer overwhelmed by the obstacles. In fact, they had started to see the challenges as opportunities, ways to learn and grow together rather than apart. Isabella had taken the plunge and opened her bookstore. The space was small but filled with charm, tucked away in a cozy corner of the city. The opening day was a triumph, with friends old and new coming to support her dream. She felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment as she stood in the shop, the shelves stocked with the books she loved, the ones that had inspired her, and the ones she hoped would inspire others. It wasn't easy. Running the bookstore took all of her energy, but she had never been more content. It was her space, her dream realized, and it was hers to nurture. For Liam, the progress was just as significant. He had begun scaling back the pressure from his family, making it clear to them that he was no longer going to be bound by the expectations they had laid out for him. His relationship with his mother had become strained, but he no longer felt the need to apologize for choosing his own path. Instead, he worked to create a future that felt true to who he was. His business remained successful, but it no longer defined him in the same way. Still, there were moments when he felt torn. There were times when his responsibilities to his family and his legacy pressed on him, and he wondered if he was doing the right thing by walking away from it all. But then he would think of Isabella, her strength, her passion for what she had built, and he would remember why he was fighting so hard. For love. For a life that wasn't dictated by the expectations of others, but by what they both wanted. But even with all the progress they had made, there were still moments when doubts crept in. The reality of their worlds being so different from one another was still a constant presence. Isabella sometimes found herself questioning whether she could truly be a part of Liam's life, a life that was so intertwined with wealth and power. She was proud of the life she had built, But there were times when she felt small in comparison to the world Liam had come from. And no matter how much he reassured her, no matter how much he told her she was enough, those insecurities still lingered. Liam, too, had his moments of uncertainty. He loved Isabella with all his heart, but there were days when he wondered if he had made the right choice, leaving behind the life he had known to forge a new path with her. The pressure to return to his family's business, to meet the expectations of his parents, was never truly gone. He had rejected their offer for an arranged marriage with Evelyn, but that didn't erase the tension between him and his family. It seemed like the more he tried to build something of his own, the more the weight of his past tried to pull him back. One evening, as they sat together at Isabella's bookstore after hours, the conversation turned in a direction they both had been avoiding. "I've been thinking," Isabella said, her voice low, as she placed the last book on the shelf. "About us. About what comes next." Liam turned to her, his heart skipping a beat. He knew this conversation was coming, but he wasn't sure he was ready for it. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she began, taking a deep breath, "we've been building this life together, and I'm happy with where we are. But sometimes I wonder if we're heading in the right direction. I love you, I do, but I don't want to lose myself again. I can't let your world consume me, and I can't live in constant fear of what people think." Liam's heart clenched. "Isabella, I don't want you to lose yourself. I want you to be who you are. I want you to have everything you've worked for, everything you deserve. But I also want to build something with you, something that we can both be proud of." She nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "I don't want to feel like we're constantly walking on eggshells, Liam. I don't want to have to choose between your world and mine. I want us to find a way to be together without sacrificing who we are." Liam took a step toward her, reaching for her hand. "Then we will. We'll find a way. We don't have to choose between our worlds. We just have to make sure that we don't lose each other in the process." Isabella squeezed his hand, but the doubt was still there, lingering in the back of her mind. "But do we really know what we're doing? Do we know how to make this work long term? I'm not sure if I can continue to live in two different worlds without losing myself, without losing us." The question hung in the air, unspoken but understood. Could they make this work? With their vastly different lives, with the pressures that surrounded them both? Could love truly bridge the gap between their worlds? Liam thought for a long moment, the weight of her words pressing down on him. The answer wasn't easy, but he knew one thing for certain. He didn't want to live without her. He didn't want to go back to a life that felt empty, that felt dictated by everyone except the two of them. "I don't know what the future holds, Isabella," Liam said, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. "But I do know that I want to face it with you. I want to find a way to make this work, together. It won't be easy, and there will be times when we're pulled in different directions. But I'm not giving up on us." She looked at him, her eyes searching his, as though trying to read the sincerity in his words. Finally, after a long pause, she nodded. "Then let's figure it out, together." They stood there in the quiet of the bookstore, the soft glow of the streetlights outside casting a warm light on their faces. It was a moment of peace amidst the chaos of their lives. They didn't have all the answers, and they knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready to walk it together. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt like maybe, just maybe, they could finally have everything they'd ever wanted. Part 12. Building Bridges. The days after their conversation in the bookstore were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Liam and Isabella knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but both of them were committed to forging a path together, despite the obstacles that still loomed over them. They had decided, for better or for worse, to face the challenges side by side. Liam continued to juggle the responsibilities of his family, business, and the life he was trying to create with Isabella. It wasn't easy, but he felt a sense of resolve he hadn't known before. He no longer saw the pressure from his family as something that defined him. It was something he could work through, just as he had with his own life. But the constant pull of their expectations still lingered, always present, a reminder that he wasn't truly free from the life they had planned for him. For Isabella, the struggle was different. She had embraced her decision to open the bookstore, and she poured every ounce of energy she had into making it successful. Her life, though quieter and more intimate than Liam's, was hers. But still, there were moments when she questioned whether her world could truly coexist with his. Could she continue to hold on to her independence while sharing a life with someone who had so much power and expectation placed upon him? They spent more time together in those first few months after their conversation. Even on the busiest of days, they would carve out time to simply be. Sometimes, it was a quiet dinner at their favorite café. Other times, it was a spontaneous walk through the city streets where the noise of the world faded away, and all that mattered was the two of them. But there were still moments when the world outside their bubble crept in. Liam's mother would call, reminding him of the family obligations he couldn't ignore. Evelyn would pop up at social events, forcing him to smile and maintain the image of the perfect heir. And Isabella's fears, though less frequent, still gnawed at her, making her question if she was truly strong enough to make this work. One afternoon, Liam and Isabella sat together at the bookstore, sipping coffee after a long day. The sun was setting, casting a golden light through the large windows. It was peaceful, a rare moment of calm. Isabella rested her head against the back of her chair, looking at the shelves that lined the walls. The books she had always dreamed of having, the ones that told the stories of her life and the lives of others, were now within reach. Liam watched her, a soft smile tugging at his lips. He had always admired her strength, her quiet determination, but he also knew that the pressure of being with him wasn't easy. He could see the way she struggled with her place in his world, the flashy parties, the corporate dinners, the constant demands, and he didn't want her to feel like she was losing herself in the process. "Isabella," Liam began, his voice soft but serious. "I've been thinking a lot about where we go from here. I want to be with you, more than anything. But I don't want you to feel like you're being pulled in two directions. I can't do this without you, but I also want you to have your life, your dreams, your space." Isabella looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and uncertainty. She had heard him say this before, but there was something different in his tone now. There was a sincerity, a real understanding of what she needed, that had been absent before. It was as if he was finally seeing her not just as his partner, but as an individual with her own goals and aspirations. "I've been thinking the same thing," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I've never wanted to be the woman behind the scenes, Liam. I've always wanted to stand on my own. But I also don't want to feel like I'm constantly fighting against your world. I don't want us to keep living in this tug of war." Liam reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers. "We don't have to fight, Isabella. I don't want that. I want us to find a way to be in this together, without losing who we are." Isabella smiled, the weight in her chest lifting just slightly. She had always known that the road ahead would be difficult, but hearing him speak so openly about their future made her feel like they could actually navigate it. Maybe they wouldn't have all the answers right now, but they were on the right path. "I don't have all the answers either," she said, "but I think we're getting closer to figuring it out. It's going to take time, but as long as we keep talking, as long as we don't let the world decide for us, I think we'll be okay." Liam squeezed her hand gently. "We will be. I promise." The next few months were a testament to their commitment. They continued to balance their lives, sometimes with ease, other times with difficulty. But with every passing day, they learned more about what it meant to be in a relationship that wasn't just built on love, but on mutual respect for each other's worlds. For Liam, it meant continuing to break free from the mold his family had created for him. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when he felt the weight of their expectations, but he had Isabella by his side, and that made all the difference. He learned to prioritize his own happiness, to live for himself, not for anyone else's approval. For Isabella, it meant carving out space in a world that was sometimes overwhelming. It meant facing her fears head-on, embracing the parts of Liam's life that she could accept and rejecting the parts that felt like a threat to her independence. She didn't want to give up her dream for him, but she also realized that their dream could be one they built together if they continued to meet each other halfway. One evening, after a long day, they sat together on the couch in Liam's apartment. The world outside was still, the city lights flickering in the distance. Isabella leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence beside her. "We've come a long way," she said softly. Liam kissed the top of her head, his voice low and full of contentment. "We have, and we're just getting started." They didn't have all the answers, and they knew that their journey was far from over. But for the first time, they were no longer afraid of the future. They were ready to face whatever came their way, together. And that, in itself, was a victory. A step toward forever. As the months stretched into a year, Liam and Isabella settled into a rhythm that, while not perfect, worked for them. They had built something unique, something that defied the expectations of both their worlds. Isabella's bookstore continued to thrive, her dreams slowly expanding beyond the small, intimate shop she had first opened. She had begun to host book readings, community events, and even started a small book club where the customers she had grown close to could gather and talk about the stories that shaped their lives. The space was more than just a bookstore now. It had become a symbol of her resilience, her independence, and her belief in the simple joys of life. For Liam, his life was no longer defined by the weight of his family's business empire. He still ran the company, but he had shifted his focus. His passion for philanthropy had grown, and he began using his wealth and influence to support causes he deeply believed in. He found a sense of fulfillment in giving back to communities that needed it most, working alongside Isabella to fund literacy programs and support small businesses, particularly those run by women. Despite their progress, both Liam and Isabella knew that there was always a tension beneath the surface, the divide between their worlds that they could never fully ignore. The high society parties, the galas, and the constant public scrutiny were parts of Liam's life that would never completely fade away, no matter how hard he tried to distance himself. Isabella still felt like an outsider in those circles, even though she had found ways to make her voice heard. But that night, as they stood side by side, preparing for one of Liam's more formal events, a charity gala benefiting one of their shared projects, Isabella felt something shift in her heart. This was no longer about finding a way to fit in. It was about them. They had built something of their own, one that transcended the differences between their worlds. It had been messy, painful at times, but it had also been beautiful. Liam adjusted his bow tie in front of the mirror and glanced over at Isabella, who was adjusting the strap of her elegant dress. The soft green fabric hugged her curves perfectly, and her hair was pulled back in a graceful updo. Despite the luxury of the event, there was something about her that made it all seem irrelevant. She wasn't here to impress anyone, she was here because she chose to be. "You look incredible," Liam said, his voice soft, but filled with admiration. Isabella smiled, her eyes meeting his in the reflection. "So do you," she replied, stepping closer to him. "But you know, I've been thinking." Liam raised an eyebrow, looking at her curiously. "What about?" "I've been thinking about how far we've come," she said, her voice steady. "How much we've grown, individually and together. And I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. And I don't want us to lose who we are in the process." Liam's heart swelled at her words. He knew exactly what she meant. They had both struggled so much with finding balance, with merging their worlds in a way that didn't feel like compromise. There were still moments of doubt, but they had found a way to hold on to each other, to hold on to themselves. "We won't," he said, his tone confident, as he reached for her hand. "We've already done what most people think is impossible. We've figured it out, together." She nodded, squeezing his hand gently. "I think we're ready for whatever comes next." They made their way to the event, where the world of high society awaited them. But for once, neither of them felt like they were playing a part. They were there because they wanted to be. and they weren't afraid of the attention or the judgment that sometimes came with it. As they entered the grand ballroom, the eyes of the room turned toward them. The glittering chandeliers, the luxurious gowns, and the men in tuxedos all seemed like part of a distant dream, one they had both once felt disconnected from. But tonight, it didn't matter. Tonight, they were simply Liam and Isabella. No expectations, no pressure. Liam led her to the center of the room, and they stood there for a moment, surrounded by conversations and laughter, but in their own world. Isabella glanced around, noticing how she no longer felt small in this space. She wasn't trying to fit into their world, she was simply a part of it, standing tall beside the man she loved. "Are you nervous?" Liam asked, leaning in close enough that only she could hear him. "Not anymore," she replied with a smile. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." He smiled back, his hand resting on her waist as they moved together through the crowd. The evening passed in a blur of conversations, laughter, and quiet moments shared between the two of them. Liam was more relaxed than she had ever seen him at these events. It was as if, for the first time, he wasn't carrying the weight of expectation on his shoulders. He was simply living in the moment, sharing it with her. Later in the evening, as the event began to wind down, Liam took Isabella's hand and led her outside onto the balcony that overlooked the city. The night was cool, the stars bright above them. "Is this what you imagined?" Liam asked, his voice soft as he gazed at her. She took a deep breath, looking out at the lights of the city. "No," she said with a laugh. "I never imagined any of this, but I wouldn't change a thing." Liam turned to face her, his expression serious now. "Isabella, I know we've had our struggles, but I've never been more certain of anything. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined this, never imagined that a life built on so much uncertainty could lead to something so sure. "I want that too, Liam," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want that more than anything." As they stood there, the sounds of the gala fading into the background, Liam took a step closer. The moment was simple, quiet, and yet it held more meaning than anything they had ever experienced. Their journey had been anything but easy, but it had been worth it. And in that moment, they both knew that the future, no matter what it brought, would be theirs to build together. Together, they had learned how to bridge the gap between their worlds. Together, they had found a way to make love, dreams, and reality coexist. And together, they would face whatever challenges the future held, united, strong, and more certain than ever that their love was enough to carry them forward. New horizons. Months passed, and the steady growth of their shared life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Liam and Isabella were no longer just two individuals from opposite worlds trying to find common ground. They had become a team. They had started creating their own world, one where love, compromise, and dreams coexisted. The obstacles they faced were no longer insurmountable, and the fear of losing themselves in each other's lives was slowly replaced by the assurance that they could build something lasting. Isabella's bookstore flourished. She expanded her collection to include not only the novels that had shaped her life, but also sections dedicated to self-help, entrepreneurship, and even a small corner dedicated to young adult fiction. And her book club was a hit, and it wasn't long before she was asked to speak at local community events, sharing her story of perseverance, of following her passion despite the odds. Liam's involvement in the philanthropic causes they both cared about grew deeper. He spent more time with Isabella, volunteering at literacy programs, helping fund scholarships for young women in business, and using his influence to amplify causes that mattered to them. They were no longer just partners in love. They were partners in creating a better future. Together, they had found a way to make their disparate worlds converge without sacrificing who they were. But just when things seemed to be falling into place, they were confronted with a new challenge, one neither of them had anticipated. A significant opportunity had arisen for Liam to expand his family's business into an international market. It was an ambitious project, one that would require him to travel extensively, spend months abroad, and lead a team of executives. His family, of course, was thrilled by the prospect. But Liam knew what it would mean for him and Isabella. It was a step up in his career, a major milestone in terms of legacy. But it also came with a price. The distance it would create between him and Isabella, the time apart, the stress of managing not only the business but their relationship. It was a cost he hadn't fully calculated. Sitting together one evening after Liam had received the news, the weight of the decision hung between them. They were sitting in the quiet living room of their shared apartment, the soft hum of the city outside their window. "This is huge," Liam said, his voice filled with uncertainty as he looked at Isabella. "It's the kind of opportunity I can't pass up, an opportunity to take my family's business to the next level, to build something that lasts. But I don't want to do it at the cost of us." Isabella could see the conflict in his eyes. She knew how much this meant to him, how hard he had worked to carve his own path within his family's legacy. But she also knew what it meant for their future. "I know this means a lot to you," she said softly, her voice steady. "But what does it mean for us, for me, for our life together?" Liam sat down beside her, his hand finding hers. "I don't want to lose us, Isabella. I don't want to go down this path if it means we can't be together. But at the same time, I feel like this is my chance to prove to myself and to everyone that I'm not just the heir to a business. I'm someone who can build something of my own." Isabella understood the weight of his words. She had seen the struggles he had faced, the constant pressure to live up to expectations that were never his own. This project was his chance to take control, to finally step out of the shadow of his family's legacy. But she also understood the toll it could take. Time apart, the stress of balancing their relationship with his new responsibilities. She couldn't shake the fear that it might pull them in different directions, that they might lose the bond they had worked so hard to build. "Liam," she said, her voice tinged with both love and concern, "I want you to chase your dreams. I want you to build the life you've always wanted. But I can't be the one who holds you back. And I can't live in limbo, waiting for you to be there when you're not. I need to know that we're still in this together." Liam's heart ached as he heard the vulnerability in her voice. He had never wanted her to feel neglected, to feel like she wasn't a priority. He loved her too much to risk losing her, but he knew this opportunity couldn't just be dismissed. It wasn't about wealth or power, it was about his own sense of identity, about proving that he could stand on his own 2 feet. "I don't know what this will mean for us," he admitted, his voice low. "I don't know if I'm ready for the sacrifices it will require. But I do know that I want you in my life, Isabella. No matter what. I don't want to lose what we have." They sat there for a while, the quiet of the evening wrapping around them like a blanket. They didn't have the answers, and there was no easy solution. But in that moment, they knew they had reached another crossroads, one where their love would be tested in ways they hadn't anticipated. Isabella leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand still resting in his. "We'll figure it out," she said softly, her voice steady. "We've faced everything together so far. We'll face this too. No matter how hard it is, we'll figure it out." Liam kissed the top of her head, a sense of peace settling over him. They didn't need to have it all figured out. They didn't need to know what the future would hold. All they needed was the understanding that whatever came their way, they would face it together. As the night stretched on, they knew that the road ahead would require sacrifices, compromises, and decisions that would shape the course of their lives. But they were ready to face it, hand in hand. Together, they could handle whatever came next. The uncharted path, the weeks following their conversation, were filled with introspection. Liam had never felt more conflicted. The opportunity to expand his family's business was everything he had worked toward, but it also threatened the delicate balance he had with Isabella. The last thing he wanted was to lose her, to let this dream, this opportunity, pull them apart. He spent long nights pondering the decision, often sitting in his office, staring out at the city lights. His mind raced between the image of his future one that could be monumental for his career and the life he was trying to build with Isabella. It wasn't just about his family's expectations anymore. It was about his own desires, his own sense of worth. But at the same time, he knew that Isabella's dreams mattered too. She had her own life, her own ambitions, and he couldn't ignore that. Isabella, too, was feeling the weight of the crossroads they had arrived at. Her bookstore was thriving, but a part of her felt the sting of uncertainty. She had always been fiercely independent, but her love for Liam had made her question how much of herself she was willing to give up. Could she continue to build her own future while supporting Liam in this new venture? Or would their love be consumed by the very ambitions they had both worked so hard to achieve? She had taken some time away from the bookstore, traveling to a small coastal town for a weekend to clear her mind. As she walked along the beach, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore brought a sense of clarity that had eluded her for weeks. The sea had always been a place of solace for her, a reminder of how vast the world was, and how small her worries sometimes seemed in the grand scheme of things. But even as she walked, her thoughts circled back to Liam. Could they make this work? Could they find a way to keep their love intact, despite the inevitable changes that lay ahead? She thought of their quiet evenings together, the simple moments when it felt like the world had faded away, and it was just the two of them. She thought of his commitment to making their relationship work, the way he had always prioritized her in ways no one ever had. But now, they were on the brink of something bigger, something that threatened to shift the foundation of everything they had built. When she returned from her trip, she was greeted by a message from Liam, one that she had been expecting but didn't know how to respond to. He had asked her to meet him at the same café where they had spent countless hours talking about their future, where they had both first begun to understand the depth of their feelings for each other, the very place that had become their sanctuary. Isabella arrived a little early, taking a seat by the window and watching the world go by. The city was as busy as ever, people rushing to and from their destinations, completely unaware of the life-changing decisions unfolding in this small cafe. Her fingers played nervously with the edge of her napkin as she waited for Liam to arrive. When he walked in, his expression was calm, but she could see the storm of emotions beneath the surface. He sat down across from her, his usual confidence replaced with an uncertainty that mirrored her own. "Isabella," Liam began, his voice steady, though she could hear the hesitation in it. "I've been thinking about everything. The opportunity, the future, us." She nodded, her heart in her throat. She had been thinking about it too, every minute of every day since their conversation. But now, with him sitting in front of her, it all felt real. The weight of it was heavier than anything she had imagined. "I know this isn't just about my career," he continued, his eyes searching hers. "It's about us, about our future together. I don't want to lose you, and I don't want to feel like I'm pushing you into a life you didn't sign up for, but I also know this is something I have to do for myself." Isabella felt a lump form in her throat. She had always known that Liam's family and career would pull at him. She had always known that there would be moments like this where their dreams and ambitions collided. But now, hearing him admit it, hearing him express the weight of his decision, it made her question whether she could continue to give him the space he needed while still holding on to her own dreams. "I understand, Liam," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I know how much this means to you, and I want you to have everything you've worked for. But I can't be the woman who watches you chase your dreams while I stay behind, feeling like I'm holding you back. I don't want to give up on us, but I can't give up on myself either." Liam reached across the table, his hand covering hers gently. "I don't want you to give up on yourself, Isabella. I want you to keep following your dreams, just like I'm following mine. And I promise you, no matter where this takes us, we will figure it out. We'll always have each other. I'm not asking you to give up your life for mine. I'm asking you to be part of this journey, wherever it takes us." Isabella looked down at their joined hands, the words sinking in. She had always been afraid of losing herself, of losing the independence she had fought so hard to build. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way for them to keep growing individually and together. She took a deep breath and looked up at Liam, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "I'm scared, Liam, but I'm willing to try." We'll figure it out. Together. Liam's face softened, relief flooding through him. He had never been more sure of anything. Together, he repeated. They sat there, hands still intertwined, the weight of the decision slowly lifting from their shoulders. There were still many unknowns ahead, still many challenges to face. But in that moment, they both knew one thing. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The future was still uncharted, but they were ready to navigate it, together. The story of Liam and Isabella teaches us that love is not just about finding someone to share your life with. It's about finding a partner who supports your growth and respects your individuality. True love requires balance, where both people are allowed to pursue their own dreams while being there for each other. It's easy to get lost in the expectations of others, especially when it comes to family, career, or societal pressure. However, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. Only when you fully embrace who you are and allow your partner to do the same, can you create a partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and love. Life is about compromise, but it's also about maintaining your sense of self. Don't be afraid to take risks for love, but don't lose yourself in the process. The road to happiness is not always easy or clear, but the willingness to grow together while never losing sight of your individual journey is the foundation of a meaningful relationship. Always remember, it's not about fitting into each other's worlds, it's about building your own, together. As their journey continued, Liam and Isabella realized that love, no matter how powerful, isn't always a smooth ride. They faced challenges, doubts, and moments when they wondered if they were strong enough to make it. But what kept them going was the undeniable connection they shared, the love that had grown between them, and the unwavering support they gave each other, no matter what. In the end, they found a way to make their dreams align, even if it meant stepping out of their comfort zones. And in that process, they both discovered that love wasn't just about being together, it was about growing together, overcoming obstacles, and building a life that they could both be proud of. No matter where life took them, they knew that the strength of their bond would always guide them through. And as they faced the unknown, they knew one thing for sure. Love, true love, was always worth fighting for. So, as the lights of the city dimmed behind them, they walked forward hand in hand, hearts intertwined, ready for whatever came next. Thank you for joining us in this beautiful journey. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments below. Share where you're from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, and remember, love will always find its way.